This morning, we're exploring the growth of electric vehicles, also known as EVs, in the Houston area with our newest episode of STEM City. Dr. Owais Durrani, our STEM City host, is here to talk all about EVs this morning. I know you had the opportunity to go to the car show, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it was like being a kid at Disney,
Right.
seeing like all types of cars, and then especially the Evolve Houston EV Pavilion.
Yeah.
There's so many different kinds of EVs. And so like our recipe for STEM City is really simple, right? I find something that is cool to most people, and then see if there's a STEM component to it. And that's what it was here, basically. Evolve Houston is a nonprofit in Houston supported by like the city, the University of Houston. So I reached out to them, and they kind of taught me about EVs and then connected me with Porsche of North Houston. We got to drive some of their EVs and what they're doing, talk to an EV tech there who uses a lot of STEM items, but it's just a different career path and how they work on these crazy technical cars and crazy gadgets and all that. And then we talked to Shell. You think of oil when you think of Shell the first thing, but they're leading EV battery technology. We got to go in their labs, learn about how batteries are made. I asked some really basic questions about how can I extend my iPhone battery and stuff like that. But it was a really, insightful,
enlightening
journey. And I learned so much.
Okay. Well, are we going to take a look at it now?
We are, yeah.
Okay,
let's take a look at it. Welcome to this month's episode of STEM City, where we explore electric vehicles, the infrastructure that surrounds them, and the STEM careers that power them. Our first stop today is Porsche of North Houston. Well, Daniel, thanks so much for sitting down with me. When we decided to talk about EVs, we had to find like the coolest EV manufacturer to go to and talk about them. And so we came here to Porsche, and you work on Porsches.
Yes.
And so tell me about what your role is here, how long you've been here, and what you do.
So I'm a gold level certified technician here at Porsche North Houston. I specialize in electric vehicles, hybrids, and electrical diagnosis. I've been fortunate enough to be a leader of the team in the shop, and I'm in year 10 of my career here.
Wow, 10 years. So obviously 10 years ago, EVs weren't like the most common thing.
Right.
And the work you need to do on a internal combustion engine versus a Taycan is different. How is that? How have you learned those skills throughout your career the last 10 years?
It's a bit of a shift because when you think of a race car, you think of fast and loud, and then electric vehicles obviously have no exhaust noise. It's hard to make the transition from internal combustion to all electric, but it's what Porsche does. So they were able to work around it and make an all-electric car that is fully capable of any of our other internal combustion engine cars.
Kind of rewinding a bit, when you were, say, in middle school, high school, how did you first realize that this was the line of work you wanted to go into?
I always liked cars, and I always kind of envied the people that I was around, and they would work on cars, fix their own cars, and all that stuff. I never really had the opportunity to work on my own cars, and so ultimately I decided that that's the career path that I wanted to take. So I decided to move to Houston and go to Universal Technical Institute and study automotive technology. I was there for about a year and a half, and then I was working here as a shop hand already. And then towards the end of my time at school, Porsche reached out to me, and they read over my transcript, and they wanted to know if I was interested in going to their manufacturer-specific training. So I went through a round of interviews and test taking, and ultimately got accepted. Moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was there for 6 months, and moved back and hit the ground running from there. So
about 2 years total of initial training.
Yes.
And then, so obviously we talk about lifelong education and learning in most careers, and that's very true to your career because EVs are a newer thing that's developed over the last couple of years. So what kind of training do you guys get to learn about how to work on EVs, for example? Is it like a weekly thing? Do you get go to Atlanta again for a few months? What does that look like?
So Porsche does put on classes for training, whether it's new technologies, whether it's new suspension components, new vehicles, new engines. So they do take periods of time where they offer classes for that, and your dealer will send you to class. That way you can be constantly updated. There's no specific time frame during the year. It's, hey, we have these classes now, and they're going to be offered during this time frame. So if anyone's interested or anyone's available, they'll usually send a couple technicians, usually lead technicians or the shop foreman, and they'll go to those classes. So whenever they get back, they can kind of update everybody else in the shop.
Do you get to, work with math or engineering? I know you do, but what does the day-to-day of using components of, from science class look like in your day-to-day job?
A lot of it is pure visual. I don't put pen to paper and start, working math problems and stuff usually. A lot of that is using our diagnostic tester. It gives you the information and the values that it reads off. And it's up to you to kind of determine based on this large log of information that it's reading to help you determine where the problem is.
Well, Casey, we just got to drive the Taycan, which was really awesome. It's my first time driving, I think your first time as well. And so that was like a deep dive into EVs, and now we get to kind of pull back and look at the bigger picture a little more. So you work at Evolve, you lead Evolve. So tell me a little bit more about what Evolve is and what your role there is.
Yeah, Evolve Houston is a nonprofit in town, and we provide EV information and experiences to Houstonians. So whether you're a resident or a business, we want to make sure that you have a distinct advantage in interacting with EVs. And we're really, we're powered by a member network, and that member network is really led by Shell, Centerpoint, the University of Houston, and the City of Houston. They've been great supporters of us and ongoing supporters of us to be able to provide those experiences and information to Houston.
That's awesome. And then what is your role in particular with Evolve Houston?
Yeah, I'm our president and executive director, so I am lucky enough to get to lead a great team in delivering that value to this community.
So you obviously drive a lot of EVs for the work you do.
Yeah.
What's like one thing that stands out to you that people who maybe don't drive EVs that you like about EVs in general?
There's really two things that stand out. Everybody that I take in an EV says some form of, wow, this is so quiet and smooth.
Yeah, which it is right now.
And it's very, very sporty.
Yeah.
So you tend to get those comments across the, riding in EVs, especially for the first time.
Yeah. The cool thing is, even when you get one that's not marketed towards like being a sports car, it's still faster and sportier than what the equivalent gas car would be for that vehicle. Yeah.
That's where I get all the comments about sportiness is, when you step inside of an SUV or a car that's designed to carry a family.
Yeah.
And you get in it and its performance is that of a sports car. It really surprises a lot of people how fun they can be, while also having a lot of utility to them.
Yeah.
We're in a premium sports car right now.
Yeah.
This is incredibly smooth, incredibly quiet in here.
Yeah.
We're driving a Porsche right now, and and you and I are having a conversation. So smooth, so quiet, and comes with all the sportiness that you expect in an EV.
Yeah. Have you driven this one before? Or
I've not. No.
Okay. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, this is extremely smooth, very, very planted, tons of control, very, very comfortable.
And I'll be honest, like when I was maybe in like, I don't know how long ago it was, 10 years ago, when like the EV conversations first started and it's like, oh, we're gonna go all EV. I was like, no, the power and fun of driving like a gas vehicle, they're trying to take that away, like kind of that initial instinct. And obviously we're many years later, technology's developed, but like when you're driving it, there's nothing that you're missing that you could have like in a gas-powered vehicle, but like I mentioned, it feels more. The cool thing is that EVs are all about, STEM technology moving forward, and you have a science background. You studied physics, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
What led you down the road of studying physics?
Yeah, physics for me was a form of applied mathematics. I was fascinated by applying math to the real world to determine where a cannonball would land if we shot it, or how fast it would take a feather to fall in the Grand Canyon to the bottom. It was just so interesting to be able to study that.
Do that. My biggest accomplishment was getting a cardboard boat to float in a pool in high school physics.
Quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. So while I was stalking you online, you also played football in college. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's really cool because we think of STEM, and sometimes we put them into boxes. Like you're only going to do physics and not do football, or you're only going to do this thing and not that thing. Talk to me a little more about how you balance, doing something that's very rigorous physics, but then also playing sports in college.
Balancing it was challenging, but balancing it required commitment on both ends, and they were both very important to me. And so prioritizing my education and playing sports was a big deal, and I allotted my time accordingly. And something around that I love highlighting to people and to kids in general is you don't have to subscribe to a stereotype of STEM. Most of us hear STEM and we think of engineers.
Yeah.
I studied physics. You walk in a physics classroom and you wouldn't have known that I was a quarterback on the football team, and vice versa. You could have seen me on the football field and interacted with me, and you wouldn't have known that I was a physics student. And so, I tell people, don't create buckets that you have to fit in. Find your passions and tie those to your passions. And just because you're passionate about something else that's outside of a stereotype doesn't mean that you can't study engineering or study physics or study some other form of science or take some other technical courses.
Yeah.
Those backgrounds are incredibly valuable. And I learned a lot from both of those experiences in college that make me who I am today.
The really unique thing in your role is that you get to work with Porsche, you get to work with Shell, you get to work with the University of Houston. So folks that are involved with different facets of EVs and then the STEM careers that surround them. What's something that someone who may not be involved in this EV kind of infrastructure world may not know about the careers that do exist?
Oh, I would say tons of opportunity, first of all. When you look at the onset of electric vehicles, especially here in this region, they're growing very rapidly. And in order for that to happen, we have to have a workforce that supports it. And when you think about electric vehicles, it's vehicles. We got to experience an unbelievable vehicle today, but it's also how do we charge them? And that part of this industry creates a tremendous amount of opportunity, not just for an engineer, but also for technicians. And I encourage people to think there's technicians for vehicles. We got a chance to meet a technician today with a great story.
Yeah.
But there's technicians that are going to work on this EV charging network, or what people would call EV infrastructure. So there's a lot of exciting opportunity, and that opportunity scales from executive leadership right down to boots on the ground as this industry grows.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the really cool part, that there's all these jobs that you could work in that may not be advertised or the first thing you think of when you think of EV infrastructure, but these careers are obviously going to continue to expand because EV infrastructure is expanding.
We just recorded at the end of the third quarter in 2023, almost 14% of our new vehicles registered on roads in the greater Houston area were some form of an EV.
Wow.
Right? So whether that's a battery electric vehicle like what we drove today, a plug-in hybrid, or a hybrid electric vehicle. And we're primarily registering the hybrid electrics and the full battery vehicles. And so what's exciting is to see that go from 7.5% at the beginning of the year to the third quarter, nearly 14%. You're seeing a very, very rapid growth of that. And right here in the energy capital of the world.
The 14% number, that's shocking to me in a good way, because if you'd asked me, I'd be like 5% in new vehicles or something. Do you foresee, we don't have to put a number of years on this, but at one point EV chargers will be as common as a gas station, come off a freeway and there will be like a massive EV charging station one day?
I think EV charging adds another dimension to fueling or energizing our vehicles.
Yeah.
So, an EV charger can be placed at your place of work, it can be where you grocery shop, it can be at your home, it could be in your apartment parking complex. We didn't have gas stations in those locations, and now we have this extra dimension that we can fuel our vehicles in a lot of different places while we're doing something else.
My first EV experience was actually at the Houston Auto Show last year. Evolve Houston had a presence there and whatnot. And then I think you guys are doing something similar this year. So, if you want to learn more about EVs or driving EV, tell us about what people could do with Evolve Houston at the Houston Auto Show.
Yeah, so first of all, go to our website, learn more about EVs, reach out to us.
Yeah.
We're on all the major social networks as well. Follow us on those to see interesting stories. We do put out a newsletter, which is quite exciting to follow, that's very EV specific. That goes out weekly. But go to the Houston Auto Show. We're the presenting sponsor of Houston Auto Show again this year. We will have an excellent indoor EV showroom for you to interact with EVs and ask us questions. And we're also going to have, again, an all-electric test drive set up. And so people can come out and drive an EV themselves for free at the Houston Auto Show.
Nice. So hopefully you don't get tired of me because I'm going to show up and drive all of them. But no, thanks so much for sharing some of these thoughts with us. You are in a really unique position where you get to see all the facets of the industry, and this was really helpful. This was fun. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So we got to talk with Casey from Evolve, who led us through how Houston is electrifying our vehicles. We got to drive a cool Porsche and talk with an EV tech about how his career allows him to service EVs. And now we're at the Shell Technology Center, where we get to talk with their chief scientist for battery and integration about how they're leading battery transformation and how they're going to allow us to drive our EVs longer and more efficiently. Thanks so much for joining us on STEM City. As I kind of personally delved down the EV journey and tried to learn about the landscape, the name Shell kept coming up. So talking to the chief scientist for energy and integration at Shell is an honor. And so we'll start with that. That's a big title. What does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah, it really is. It's an honor to have this position, to be one of the 6 chief scientists in Shell and one of 3 based here in Houston. So what I get to do is a lot of science related to, in particular, electricity and energy storage and things that help put these things together like puzzle pieces. So broadly, what does that mean? I get to work on cutting edge projects with folks inside and outside of Shell. I get to work in a team that helps figure out what are critical topics for us to work on so that our businesses are successful now and in the future.
What are some of the things that Shell may be working on, or some areas that makes it relevant to EV development and us driving more electric cars?
Absolutely. So what Shell is doing right now is very much focused on providing innovative solutions for mobility. Shell is a global energy company, the world's largest mobility retailer. So we're really focused on these innovative solutions that customers need, and also specific to EVs, really making sure that process is easy to charge. As we look at what we've got today, we're at around 40,000 charge points globally. So where you can plug in to a Shell EV charger. Here in the US, it can look like plugging in at a Shell station. So for example, there's a new fast charging station up on the Grand Parkway in Katy, a little bit north of I-10. Looks like a traditional site that you'd go put gasoline in your car as well. It's got both pumps and EV chargers, but it's also places that you might spend more time that you might not initially think of, like a supermarket. We also know that a lot of people charge their EVs at home, and here in Texas, or in most of Texas, you can actually get home electricity plans that have EV considerations for charging from Shell Energy. When we go outside and we want to look at things in the real world, we have several things on site like solar panels, EV chargers of different power levels, different capabilities in being able to talk to the grid, get signals from the grid, those kinds of things, so that we can collect data and run experiments. These data then we can put into different types of analyses to predict and analyze how things might work under different conditions than the ones we tested, having that information already. And this is really important because we're continuing to grow out our EV charging network.
Really cool. And so you mentioned Stitch, which we're here at Stitch. And so there's 3 centers like this worldwide. And what I get is it's basically a large like high school science lab where people are doing a lot of cool stuff and seeing what works and what doesn't. Is that like an accurate representation of where we're at right now?
So science absolutely is very much about, and R&D in particular, about creating new things.
Yeah.
So this research facility is very much focused on bringing new technologies to life. And I'm really privileged to be part of a number of teams that do that. We also support ongoing businesses. So again, there's creativity and kind of new things coming out even in the businesses that you may associate with us. There's always something new to be developed to make it better, make it more competitive, make it safer, all of these kinds of things.
Nice. So you almost make me want to work at Shell and become an engineer. So speaking about you, what is your educational background? What did you do in college, and what led you to this point?
Absolutely. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I have a bachelor's degree and a PhD degree, both of them in chemical engineering. And I chose chemical engineering coming out of high school because I knew engineers got to solve interesting and important problems. But I also knew that I liked math and science, so it seemed like a very good fit at that point. It's often challenging to figure out what you want to study, but I found that kind of taking that and taking it one step at a time and saying, you know, am I still good? Is this something that's still working for me? Was really helpful. I actually got into the research side of things pretty early because my undergraduate degree required that we do a senior research thesis to graduate. So I started out after my first year in college doing undergraduate research to really figure out what does it mean to be a scientist, what does it mean to do research in engineering. And I had a chance to do multiple different projects throughout my time as an undergraduate student. And what that taught me was I really liked it, and there was no shortage of problems to work on that were fun and exciting to figure out. So part of what we've done more recently is have the opportunity to be more interactive with the grid, because when we first started it, it was solely what we call behind the meter, which effectively means within the fence, so not interacting with anything outside of that. But one of the things that I talked about with integration is making sure you can have that ability to take signals from, give signal to, move energy back and forth between things like this microgrid as well as the regular electric grid that we think of.
Yeah. So really cool charger. And one of the things you were just kind of telling me as we were walking up here is it's got its own set of batteries in here. And speaking of batteries, you know, I get annoyed by my iPhone or whatever phone I have losing, you know, its efficiency in battery over the few years that I've had it. And I think lots of us have those frustrations. So tell us about, you know, what batteries do, what the development moving forward looks like, and what some of the limitations are there, and, you know, just batteries in general.
Batteries are really interesting because there's so much going on inside them. So there are 3 basic components, what's called an anode, a cathode, and an electrolyte, and that's the movement of ions between those is what governs what happens. And when you talk about, you know, not having as much charge as you first started, that's a function of the chemistry that's going on, because as you do these cycles over and over, invariably you start making chemical reactions you don't want. And part of the way to help with that, and part of the reason that things are better than they used to be, twofold. One, the batteries themselves, we know how to make them so they're able to hold more charge, and more power, more energy. We also know how to control those reactions better, and we also know how to design our devices, like our phones or our cars, so that when you're charging them, when you're using them, you're not stressing them to the extent that maybe earlier on we had some experiences with. So that's another, I would say, just example of how science progresses, because we've gotten better and better batteries the more and more research and use that we've had with them. The challenge is we keep asking them to do more and more.
Yeah.
So that's part of the constant R&D cycle to make sure we can keep up with what we're trying to ask them to do.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Whether it's our cars or devices, there's always a new feature that we're using.
Exactly.
Yeah. Makes me less frustrated now.
Thanks to Evolve Houston, Shell, and Porsche of North Houston for giving us an inside look at the STEM careers that power the exciting world of electric vehicles and battery technology. See y'all next month on STEM City.
Oh, I loved this episode. One, because it was all about cars, but two, again, it reinforces just about anything and everything you can do with a STEM degree.
Yeah, science is literally all around us. We're obviously going through a massive transition when it comes to cars, and you sit in this car and you've got PhDs working on the battery component. You've got techs, making sure that they're up to date. So much science all around us. So just, I always say be curious and ask questions.
The latest and greatest, as always, Dr. Durrani. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it. If you want to watch any of our previous episodes of STEM City, just scan the QR code right there at the bottom of your screen.